This happened a few years ago. We had just moved into a new city, and I was about 11 at the time. There weren't any bus routes that came near where I lived, so my mom had to pick me up from school every day and take me in the mornings. The place we lived at the time wasn't the best. We had a lot of gang activity, kidnappings, you name it. Our city was also majority people of color, and I was one of the very few white girls. This is relevant because I got a lot of attention for being a petite, white blonde girl with blue eyes from classmates and adults. But for this specific scenario, my mom didn't want to have to drive all the way to this school to get me because it was way too busy with other parents picking up their kids. So she wanted me to walk to a local gas station and wait for her there to pick me up. We did this for a little while. One of those days I was waiting out in front of the gas station waiting for my mom to come and get me. I never felt really safe, so I always stood with my back against the wall and watched the people while they got gas. Most of the time, nobody ever bothered me. They had places to be. But one time, this adult man walked up to me and asked if I wanted a ride home. I was so surprised and scared that he had come up to me that I didn't even hear what he said, so I wanted to be polite and laughed and nodded. And then he looked really pleased and started motioning for me to come with him back to his car. At this point, I realized what he had asked me, and I was getting nervous because I didn't want to suddenly change my mind and tell him no, but I really didn't want to go with him. He noticed I wasn't following and told me to hurry up and come. I told him that I actually didn't want to and I'd be okay because my mom should be here any minute. And then he started to argue with me and tell me that it was no trouble and that I really should go with him because I'd get home faster. He even tried to tell me that if I went, he'd stop and get me something to eat on the way home. I tried really hard to tell him I didn't want to go, but he just kept insisting, and he was starting to get closer. I didn't know if I should run inside the store or not, but I was too scared to go anywhere. Thankfully, before he could get too close to me, I saw my mom's car parked on the street where she usually waited. I didn't know how long she had been there, but I told him that my mom was here. I ran to her car and got in. I told her what happened, and she told me that it was good that I didn't go with him, and that next time I should go into the store if someone bugs me like that. I remember seeing him get in his van while we were driving away, but I never saw him again. Although about a week later, a kid from my school got into a van with someone and they were missing for a few days. When they found him, it was already too late. All I can think of is that it must have been the same guy, and it could have been me. This happened about 15 years ago. I was 21 years old and living in my very first apartment. It was a small bachelor apartment in a sketchy area. I grew up in a town that was known to be rough and tough. I knew how to handle myself and learned at a young age to keep my head down and not to go looking for trouble. My apartment building was behind a bar. A lot of the customers of the bar would stand outside to smoke. When they stood outside to smoke, they would be looking at my apartment. Most of the people who were out smoking kept to themselves. A few would nod and say hello if I passed by. Never any issues. Until one evening. One evening I came home from work. I passed the bar and saw this extremely tall man outside smoking. As I passed, he stared at me. I gave him a slight nod, but he didn't acknowledge me. He just continued to stare. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't think much of it. About an hour later, I heard a knock on my door. It was odd because you have to buzz people to get into the building. The building had only 8 units and I really didn't know any other neighbors. I froze because I really didn't want to talk to anyone, but the knocking continued, so I finally shouted, "Who is it?" But there was no response. I shouted again, "Who's there?" And the voice said, "It's Tom." I didn't know anyone with the name of Tom, so I shouted back, "I don't know anyone named Tom. You must have the wrong apartment." The voice said, "You may not know me, but I know you. Open up so we can talk." I went over to the peephole, and it was the tall dude from the bar. I loudly said, "Back off or I'm calling the cops." I heard his footsteps walk away and heard the building door open and then close. He was gone, or so I thought. A few minutes later, I peek out the window, and he's standing out in the parking lot. He seemed to be talking to himself. At one point, I'm freaking out. I called my landlord, who lived in the building next to me. He told me to call the police, and in the meantime, him and his brother would check things out. I call the police and tell them what's going on. They said a car is on the way. Meanwhile, my landlord and his brother make their way to the parking lot. I watch out my window and see them approach the tall dude. The tall guy takes one look at them and bolts. My landlord and his brother try to chase him, but the guy got away. About 5 minutes later, the police arrived. I gave my version of the event and also gave a description of the guy. The officer stared at me and said, "We have reports of a man matching that description who's been assaulting women." Thank God you didn't open the door. A few days later, I got a call from the officer. He told me part of their investigation was talking to the owner of the bar. The owner called the police when a tall dude reappeared after a few days, and the police responded and arrested him. This happened 7 years ago, but I still remember the fear I felt like it was yesterday. When I was in my early 20s, I worked the night shift at a bakery making the donuts. I loved the job. 3 nights of the week, I would be with my coworker, and 2 nights I would work alone. It was summertime, and we were having some problems with the AC, so the maintenance guy, Andy, came at night when I was on the clock to work. The bakery was small and crowded during the day, so it was best for him to come when it was empty. Management would always let me know when Andy would be there, so it was never a surprise. At first he was very pleasant, and I had no issues sharing spaces with him as we worked. One evening, this changed. My one coworker was a little late. She said she lost track of time in the shower, so Andy piped in saying we should all shower together to save time and starts laughing. It was creepy. I also stated that I lived alone, with his response being, "Good, I have you to myself then." After this night, I realized Andy wasn't the kind of guy I thought he was. I stopped speaking to him unless I had to, and before long the AC was repaired and I thought I was free of him. Fast forward to a few weeks later, I'm working alone. It's 2 in the morning. I'm trying donuts when I hear all of a sudden a loud banging on the front window. Startled, I look up and see who else but Andy. He's calling my name and asking to be let in. No one said anything to me about him coming that night. Andy then starts pulling on the front door handles. Luckily, it's locked. I run to a corner of the bakery where he can't see me and try calling my manager with no response. The phone starts ringing and I can see the caller ID from where I was sitting. It's Andy. He's being relentless and won't stop banging on the window and trying to pry the door open. My fear rising, I dial 911. The cops arrive within 10 minutes and search Andy's vehicle. In the back seat, they find duct tape, a knife, and rope. They can't do anything though because apparently he hasn't harmed me. Andy told the police that he was there to fix the AC. My manager calls me back in the morning and tells me the AC's working fine, however, and they never asked Andy to come. So this beyond confused me.